Alright class, settle down. Once again, I'm here to bring you some facts from history from all across the globe that your school curriculum missed. I'm your substitute teacher James, and these are the top 10 disturbing historical facts you were never taught about in school. Part 3. And we're kicking off the list with red rain. The idea of blood raining from the sky is very biblical. If you ever saw it, you'd probably think the world was ending. As it turns out though, there are very real instances of red rain actually falling from the sky. One of which took place in Kerala, India in 2001. So everything was normal till it wasn't. Out of the blue, the skies opened up and started raining red. Raindrops that made the entire land look like a crime scene, or like it was the time of the month for Godzilla. Pretty horrific, but if there was ever a perfect time to throw on some Slayer, this was probably it. Scientists swooped in to figure out what the heck was going on. Turns out it wasn't some divine punishment, it was just airborne spores. Somehow algae can turn rain red, apparently, under the right conditions. The rain also wasn't dangerous, just incredibly off-putting. People weren't exactly lining up to take a shower in it, but it didn't harm them. Still, you can bet it left an impression. If you are liking our channel so far, then do not forget to hit that subscribe button. We have awesome videos coming at you on the daily. Moving on to number 9, we have the Monster of Glamis. Glamis Castle in Scotland has a dark mystery surrounding it. First of all, it's supposedly super haunted, as many castles are, but there's a far more interesting story here than your standard ghost tale. A rumor had it, the family living there back in the 1800s, the Bowes-Lyons, had a dark secret. They were hiding away a deformed child, often referred to as the Monster of Glamis. Now, this poor soul was supposedly so disfigured that he was kept hidden from the world. Nobody really knows the exact details because, you know, secret family business and all that, but people couldn't stop gossiping. Some say the child had no limbs. Others claimed it had an animal-like appearance, described looking almost like a toad person. The family allegedly kept them locked away in a hidden chamber away from prying eyes. Now, why would they do something so cruel and inhumane? Well, back in the day, having a child who didn't fit the mold of normal was a serious social stigma, could bring shame to the family, and people did crazy things to avoid that, especially in upper class society where they had their, you know, holier-than-thou reputation to uphold. Next on the list, we have the case of the lead masks. Alright, this is a bizarre one. Brazil, 1966. A couple of electronic technicians, Miguel Jose Viana and Manuel Pereira de Cruz, were found dead under strange circumstances. They were discovered on a hill by a kid flying a kite, and they were wearing lead masks. They also wore suits and raincoats, and there was a notebook near them with cryptic instructions. The two had apparently been preparing for something. They had raincoats, which seemed logical if you're expecting a downpour, but it wasn't raining. Plus, they had a small water bottle and some towels. So what were they getting ready for? Your guess is as good as mine. The cause of their deaths also remains a mystery. No signs of violence, no apparent reason for them to kick the bucket. The notebook they left behind, it contains strange notes like 1630, be at the agreed place, and 1830, swallow capsules. After effect, protect metals, wait for mask signal. To this day, nobody knows what those instructions meant or why these guys were up there on that hill with lead masks. One theory is that they were involved in some sort of occult experiment. Others speculate they were trying to maybe contact extraterrestrial beings. Insane case. Coming in at our number 7 spot, we have Spring-Heeled Jack. So we've all heard of Jack the Ripper, who terrorized the Whitechapel neighborhood of London in the late Victorian era. But there was another mysterious Jack that leapt his way onto the scene a good 50 or so years before, Spring-Heeled Jack. And unlike Jack the Ripper, some folks weren't even sure if Spring-Heeled Jack was even a human. London residents began reporting being attacked by an odd man. He was described as almost ghostly or devil-like. Many would say he had clawed hands, red eyes, and wore a black coat that almost made him look like he had wings. Sometimes he would knock on people's doors, and when they'd answer, he'd slash them with his claws. Other times he would just ambush people as they strolled down the streets at night. But what this terrifying figure was most well known for was its ability to leap long distances, hence the name Spring-Heeled Jack. The identity of the assailant was never discovered. It could have even been multiple assailants, copycat attackers, because Spring-Heeled Jack's sightings were reported as far as Scotland at one point. Over the years, it became something of an urban legend. I was surprised I'd never heard of this one though. Any of you heard this one? Let me know down there. Number 6, the Toynbee Tiles. The Toynbee Tiles are these mysterious tiles that started appearing on city streets across the United States in the mid-80s. The tiles are about the size of a license plate and carry a cryptic message that usually reads something like this. Toynbee idea. In movie 2001, resurrect dead on planet Jupiter. So the reference likely stems from historian Arnold J. Toynbee. The connection to Stanley Kubrick's film 2001 A Space Odyssey and the idea of resurrecting the dead on Jupiter, a little confusing. If you're interested in this case, there's a documentary called The Resurrect Dead, The Mystery of the Toynbee Tiles. Dives deep into the phenomenon following a group of urban explorers who embark on a quest to uncover the story behind the tiles. Next on the list, we have the London beer flood. So, what's so scary about a flood of beer? Said Stone Cold Steve Austin. Well, I'll tell you, Steve, several people died in this flood of beer. Gotta say, pretty cool way to go though. Always cool to go out with a bang. Even better to go out with a buzz. Anyway, you probably want to hear the actual story. So the London beer flood occurred on October 17th, 1814, in the Moo and Company's Horseshoe Brewery in London. So a huge vat containing over 135,000 gallons of beer just burst open, unleashing a tidal wave of beer into the surrounding area. 8 people lost their lives in the wave. 5 of them were mourners attending a wake held by an Irish family for a young boy. Probably the only time beer was actually unwelcome at an Irish gathering. The force, the unleashed booze, destroyed even several buildings in its path. In the days after the incident, there were stories of mass drunkenness, people collecting the beer and having these big parties in the streets. But there's some debate as to whether or not that actually went on. I gotta believe it did though. Like London in the 1800s, you don't think people were taking advantage of that situation? All this free beer! Number 4, the Voynich Manuscript. Not surprising that this wasn't brought up in school. Nobody knows what this book is trying to get across. The Voynich Manuscript is a centuries-old book that's basically complete nonsense, which you could say about a lot of ancient books, but this one is almost like a surrealist art piece or something. Totally different level. No one knows who wrote it, what it says, or even what language it's in. It's named after Wilfred Voynich, a rare book dealer who bought it in 1912. The manuscript is packed with strange drawings of plants. Some of these plants don't even exist. There are stars, human figures, all accompanied by this undecipherable text. Some pages look like herbal manuals maybe, others like astronomy guides, but the meaning behind the illustrations is a total mystery because, again, you can't read it. Carbon dating places it around 1420. Over the years, many brilliant people have tried to crack the code. And there are plenty of interesting analyses as to what it could mean, but no definitive answers. Some people think the book is holding some kind of knowledge of some kind from back then, but another interesting theory, and the one I really hope is true, is that there just is no meaning to the book, and that whoever wrote it was either out of their mind or just doing some medieval form of trolling. And at number 3, we have Kaiten. Towards the end of World War II, it was clear that the Allied forces were gaining the upper hand. Japan, who were desperate to bring victory to the Axis powers, started developing some pretty extreme strategies to cause as much damage to the enemy as possible. This included kamikaze planes, boats that would be piloted by soldiers that would take their own lives in the process, and Kaiten, which were submarines loaded with explosives operated by soldiers for the sole purpose of crashing into enemy vessels and exploding. So yeah, any man entering one of these subs was heading straight to their death. So why do this instead of launching regular torpedoes? Well, they used standard torpedoes for a while, but the Kaiten had the obvious advantage and that there would actually be a guy controlling the weapon from inside of it. This meant it had a greater chance of hitting the target, in theory anyway. Turns out this was not very successful. More Japanese soldiers died than the targets they were trying to hit. The kamikaze planes, though, on the other hand, were much more effective. Number 2, the Nazino Tragedy. The Nazino Tragedy, which happened in 1933, is a very disturbing chapter in Soviet history. Basically, the Soviet government decided it would be a good idea to exile a bunch of so-called anti-Soviet elements to this remote island called Nazino in Siberia. They crammed about 6,000 people, criminals, political descendants, and even regular folks who just got on the wrong side of authorities, onto this desolate island. Problem was, there was next to nothing there. No housing, no proper food, nada. And they didn't leave them with enough supplies. They gave them some stuff, but not nearly enough. People were left to basically fend for themselves in the freezing wilderness. And as you can imagine, what happened was a total nightmare. Starvation and disease hit hard. Desperate for food, some, in an attempt to survive, took the life of other people. Reports even say that some resorted to extreme measures, let's just say. The whole thing was a colossal disaster, and by the end, almost 4,000 people were dead. And finally, we have the Paris Morgue. So the Paris Morgue was a morbidly fascinating institution in the 19th century in France. It was a public display area for unidentified corpses, kind of like a creepy live-action, in-person version of Unsolved Mysteries. The place was where the unidentified bodies were laid out for public viewing, almost like a weird zoo. People from all walks of life, curious tourists, detectives, flocked there to sometimes actually try and identify a body, but there was also, of course, a considerable amount of morbid curiosity going on. The bodies were displayed behind glass so visitors could gawk at them without the risk of, like, catching something unpleasant, potentially. I get the purpose behind this, but it kind of feels like a spectacle of death. It was all very public, very in your face. Definitely not for the faint of heart. This bizarre attraction lasted until the early 20th century when, thankfully, more private and respectful ways of handling the dead became the norm. With all that said, though, I've been your host, James, and I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.